I feel very deeply for the community of Port Arthur and for the people of Tasmania for what they have suffered. Out of that terrible tragedy, at the very least, the governments of Australia united in their determination to have tougher and more effective gun laws. I hope that the lessons of Port Arthur will not be forgotten on the Australian community, that there is a capacity for evil in our community, and we should always work as a nation to care for those who are the victims.
A young Tasmanian, Martin Bryant, was held to be responsible for the horrific events of April 1996. But who is Martin Bryant? Martin was born on the 17th of May 1967, and right from the start it was obvious he was not a normal child. It was soon realized that he needed remedial treatment, especially for his speech, and was sent to a speech therapist. He was eventually assessed as having an IQ of 66, and one of his school teachers claimed he was the clumsiest child she had ever taught. He was later to receive an invalid pension. When he was 26 years old, his father committed suicide, and as a result of that event and of a car accident in which he was a passenger, he inherited roughly $500,000. Although able to operate passively well in society, he was not really aware of the larger events in his life. He later inherited a house from his employer and managed to live independently of his mother, Carleen, who visited him daily and cleaned up his home. He made various trips overseas using some of his inheritance and seemed to enjoy traveling. He was generally held to be quiet, courteous, and happy in his own way.
Petra Wilmot was the last person to get close to Martin Bryant. A shy country girl, she applied for a job as his part-time gardener. She became his full-time girlfriend. He was her first boyfriend. Why did you fall in love with him?
Probably because he was gentle and kind and he'd look after me.
And I believe he was often regarded as something of a simpleton, nicknamed Simple Marty.
Psychiatrist Ian Sale analysed Bryant.
He probably never had a real friendship. He didn't seem to be able to read other people's emotional and social behaviour correctly.
I kind of thought that the baddies were good and everything like that. He was a bit weird. Like he was like a young child. Like when he just thought that like the baddies were really cool.
These children used to play with Martin Bryant, their next door neighbour. They'd go over to his house and he gave them gifts. A TV for Ben 1, a doll for Evelina, and a CD player for Asher.
Because Asher said with the CD, "Oh, that's cool," and he goes, "Oh, you can have it if you like."
And then we saw another one that was better, and he goes, "Oh, you can have that one if you want."
I think he was lonely.
The Coopers became friendly with Bryant, who they thought was immature but harmless.
He was all gentle and didn't say anything to hurt you.
Yeah, and you'd never think that he'd hurt anyone or anything like that, because he just was really nice to everyone.
But just what was it that this inept and clumsy young man was accused of?
But first, a scene of horror and carnage in the Tasmanian town of Port Arthur tonight, where as many as 25 people have been shot dead in Australia's worst massacre. At least 15 people are wounded, and the gunman, who's still holding police at bay, is thought to be holding at least one person hostage. Most of the victims are reported to be tourists visiting the historic penal colony at Port Arthur.
Helicopters began ferrying the injured to Hobart from Port Arthur after a gunman opened fire there this afternoon.
We've had a gunman run amok on the Port Arthur historic site. That's 85 k's from Hobart. It happened mid-afternoon. There are at least 12 confirmed dead, if not 22. There's a further 15 injured. At the moment we have a hostage siege situation which we're attempting to contain and control.
The convict ruins are a favourite with interstate and overseas tourists. It's understood those visitors have made up the bulk of those killed or wounded. Locals near the site cringed in fear inside their shops and homes as the gunman opened fire.
Police arrest the gunman. Now the questions. Why did he do it? And why was he allowed such a deadly weapon?
Good evening everyone and welcome back to this special one-hour edition of 790 News, incorporating Today Tonight, live from Port Arthur. Later a full bulletin of local and world news with Anne Forward. But first, no words can express the horror and disbelief in this little Tasmanian tourist centre tonight. Port Arthur has become a town of crisis, of wounded crowded into hospitals, of police desperately trying to piece the massacre together, and of families shattered by tragedy.
Less than 36 hours after the gunman went on an indiscriminate rampage, the death toll stands at 35. The worst massacre by a single civilian in world history. The killer himself is in hospital with some of his victims. He was captured, his clothes ablaze as he ran from a burning building. The horrific massacre at the historic penal settlement began without warning.
You heard the gunshots?
Having murdered 32 unsuspecting local residents and tourists, the snipers stopped at a bed and breakfast lodge 5 kilometres north of the convict settlement and took 3 hostages, a couple in their 70s and a man who was earlier forced into the boot of a BMW and driven to the guest house. That car was later gutted by fire. Inside the Seascape Lodge, the man, armed with several high-powered rifles, continued firing at police, who were trying to negotiate by phone.
Our principle at the moment is to keep the house isolated and the people in it contained within the site, and we're hoping to open negotiations again. They've broken down because of some technical problems. A battery, I understand, and a phone that he had in the house ran out.
Has power to the
It's
house
as simple as that.
Victorian Special Operations Group police flew in to surround the house, where they lay in wait until dawn. Then, at 8 this morning, police were taken aback when they saw the Seascape Lodge burst into flames.
The upstairs portion of it is on fire, and there are flames coming from partly down on the lower level on part of it. It's starting to slowly spread, I understand. There are still shots being fired, so at this stage I've given instructions that none of our personnel are to approach the house.
30 minutes after the fire began, the gunman himself walked out of the cottage, his own clothes on fire. He was immediately arrested by heavily armed Special Operations Police.
The person has been taken into police custody, conveyed to the Royal Albert Hospital, suffering from burns, no gunshot wounds.
The killer was taken by ambulance to a Hobart hospital. Under police guard, his head covered. He was wheeled into casualty and will face court as soon as his doctors allow. For 2 hours today, police escorted us to see the results of the killer's rampage. The house where his 3 hostages died was still smouldering. Having arrested the gunman, aged in his late 20s, police soon realised there were no survivors in the house. It burnt to the ground, leaving only the chimney and iron veranda post standing. The 3 hostages who died inside the cottage take the unbelievable death toll to 35.